Hello and welcome to Long Beach Lens. I'm your host, Derek J. Simpson, Executive Director of the Long Beach Community Action Partnership. Dr. Alex Norman is nothing less than a Long Beach community treasure. Though he is retired as a professor from UCLA, he is very involved on local foundation boards, nonprofit boards, and works strategically as a local community activist. In his own words, he has failed at retirement after moving to Long Beach. With colleagues and community leaders, Dr. Norman has captured important community data that tells the story of Long Beach socially, civically, and economically. Specifically, he co-authored two very important reports, The State of Black Long Beach and African American Community at a Crossroads. Because of the insight and importance of these reports to the greater Long Beach community, not just the African American community, Long Beach Community Action Partnership created 3 panel discussions to share thoughts and insight. We began with Dr. Norman and another esteemed community leader, Ahmed Safir, sharing their thoughts about a powerful performing arts interpretation by Dr. Darrell Akon of the African American Community at a Crossroads.
What I want is me, for real. I want me and myself, and what that is what I be, and what I see and feel is who is me, and the what it is who it is, and when it be is what it be. I'm gonna be here if I want. Like I said, self-determination. But I ain't come from no foolish tribe. We want the mule, the land. You can make it 300 years of blue chip stock in the entire operation. We want to be paid in a central bank. The average worker farmer wage for all those years we gave it for free. Plus we want damages for all the killings and the fraud, the lynchings, the missing justice, the lies and frame-ups, the unwarranted yellings, the tar and fetterings, the character and race assassinations, historical slander, ugly caricatures. For every Sambo, fetch, and fetid flick, we want to be paid. For every hurtful thing you did or said, for all the land you took, for all the rapes, all the Rosewoods, and Black Wall Streets you destroyed, all the miseducation, jobs lost, segregated shacks we lived in, the disease that ate and killed us, the mad police that drilled us, for all the music and dances you stole, the styles, the language, the hip clothes you copped, the careers you stopped. All these are suits, specific litigation that's represented we be like we for reparations for damages paid to the Afro-American nation. Boo-dee-da, boo-dee-da, doo-boo-doo-doo, ba-dee-ba-doo-boo-doo-doo. We's at the end of being under your ignorant smell, your intentional hell. Either give us our lives or plan to forfeit your own.
Over my head, I hear music in the air. Over my head, I hear music in the air. Over my head, I hear music in the air. There must be a God somewhere over my head. I hear music in
the African tradition is that history is passed on through the oral tradition. And what Darrell did here today was an example of how that gets passed on, through the poetry, through the song, through the storytelling. So all of Long Beach, all of California, all of the world should have heard that.
What captured me is how he demonstrated with the paper that we were thrown away. And as he concluded or took us to the next level, we picked ourselves up.
Wow, that's
And that was symbolized.
That was great symbolism.
Yeah.
I guess it was 2012, 2013. Was it 5 years ago? Wow. That we had in this very building a State of Black Long Beach report in which I gathered historical data on Long Beach from 1900s to the present about the socioeconomic political standing of African Americans in Long Beach, and detailed with data some of the problems that we had. And it was a call to action. And when no action took place or followed up, over the years I just wondered, why did it not happen? And what could we have done to make it happen? And those were the two questions that really nagged me for the next 5 years. And as I began to write, I started thinking, I should approach this from a scholarly perspective, because my bias was definitely that something should have happened. But I wanted to step outside of that bias. And so I tried to be as objective as I could. And so that's why I did a historical analysis of the three themes that seem to pervade Black communities in the personas of W.B. Du Bois, of Marcus Garvey, and of Booker T. Washington. And those three themes, even though they were operating within the same context of racism, they saw things differently. And they competed with each other instead of banding together. And it was only until the civil rights movement, the modern civil rights movement, that we realized that we needed to form coalitions. And so with the leadership of Dr. King, as a result of the Montgomery boycott, the major African American organizations, the Urban League and ACP, the National Council of Negro Women, the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, all of those came together, and we advanced the most that we have ever advanced in civil rights history. So I wanted to put that into a framework that, like the griot or the storyteller, I could leave a chronicle of what happened and why it didn't happen, but raise the question, can we have a conversation about how to make it happen?
Well, the first thing, I appreciated the document because it was a good analysis as opposed to just chatter. And it made me understand how vulnerable the African American community is and how fragile we are, like those pieces of paper, in not being able to come together with a common interest. And if we really dig into what Dr. Norman has put to paper, it should be, in fact, I thought you was a physician, because he found the viruses that are hurting our community, and it's up to us to find the antidote. And these are some of the initial, as I read his paper. And we met, we got together, and you know, I wanted us to move forward with really being able to define what leadership is, because as he indicated, it has changed faces over the years, but I think now we're into a third experience as we embark in careers or in jobs. We identify with other folks and lose our identity or don't identify our identity. And what happens is it causes us to not maintain what we know about our powerful history and how strong we can be. Now, my son says, that if we were strong kings and queens, what happened? So that doesn't mean anything unless it was perpetual. So we have to come together in some kind of groups or entities to be able to develop positive leadership development and have developed the strategies, because everyone's got to buy into it. You know, was W.E. Du Bois and Booker T, were they literary leaders or were they action leaders? That second phase had more action leaders. So there's a difference. So it's still open to define leadership, because how is it coming? Do I read about it and it inspires me? Or do I hear it and feel good?
One of the reasons that that we really don't get to that third level is because we don't build an intergenerational aspect to our leadership. I have to say that I was one of the generation that benefited greatly from the previous generations. They planted shade trees knowing full well that they weren't going to sit in the shade. And it was that kind of attitude that allowed me to benefit directly from the people who sacrificed through lynchings and protests and marches. And my ancestors, I mean, I'm the grandson of free African descendants who were enslaved. So grandpa and grandma was slave on both my sides. So it's not too far from me hearing the stories about Papa Charles and Uncle Willie, you know, and Aunt Harriet and Grandma Jane. But that formed a context for me that I needed to plant some shade trees. And I think we need to plant those trees, because that's what we didn't do. Even though we reaped the benefits of the civil rights movement, we forgot to build the sustainability of the leadership in our communities. Now, part of it has to do with technology, because the technology changed, you know, and it had an impact on us that made us more individualistic than community-oriented. But one of the things that I think would be helpful to us is if, as Darrell pointed out to us, that racism is always the context in which we are operating. And if we can remember that theme, then we'll know, because that's systemic. That's the thread that runs through the American culture. And so it's not something that you get rid of. It's something that you adapt to, that you manage, that you evade, or that you build a different system in order to disengage from that which we're born into.
The strategy has been avoided in terms of how to drill down, because we have a whole generation that conspicuous consumption is just $400 Nike shoes. So what do? Can you turn them around? I mean, it's the same as when we had the division of field, yard, and house. So that division exists now generationally. So how do we bring in the immediate generation that's still with us, so that what comes next has a greater mentality to want to progress? I always tell the Black Student Union, Elders Association, it's our fault that high-rises don't have names on it and we don't own the buildings. Too many sociologists. The mere fact that our local university had less than 3% in late 60s, and I look at the stats now and it's 3.9. So that means 50 years, have we gone backwards?
And during that time, I was introduced to a book called the Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Joy DeGruy, an assistant professor at Portland State University. And during that read, Joy DeGruy advanced a theory that a group that has been enslaved, that faces continued rejection and oppression, will form post-traumatic slave syndromes. And 3 of those syndromes that she indicated would be lack of self-esteem. Another, she said, would be racial socialization, accepting the racial socialization of the oppressor. It's the double consciousness Du Bois talked about, that the perception of the other becomes accepted by us rather than our own perception. In other words, we need to define who we are instead of allowing someone else to define who we are. And so I looked at the Cambodians who had been enslaved for 3 years, and I noticed a similarity, that the Cambodians suffer from a lack of self-esteem, as we do. They were fearful of, don't wake the cat, the cat is belled, so don't wake the cat, let him sleep. Don't antagonize the city leaders. So looking at the similarity between the two, I began to use the same methods that she used. And lo and behold, I found that the intergenerational trauma that has been passed on down from the Cambodians who experienced the Khmer Rouge, beating their kids, making sure that their kids are under control by threatening them. I mean, black people will go to war over beating their kids as a way of raising them. That's passed down from the oppressive masters. The fact that, you look at somebody the wrong way and we go to war with them because they look at the wrong, or step on our shoes, or say something that we feel disrespects us, that's passed on down in the same way that Emmett Till is supposed to have looked the wrong way at a woman and it cost him his life. That's a part of the post-traumatic slave syndrome. And what DeGruy said was that one of the things that could happen was that one could be so paralyzed by the post-traumatic slave syndrome, not realizing that the ever-present anger that so many young black people feel could be turned inward. Or as James Baldwin said, the one thing that we need to do is recognize and manage that anger. Otherwise, that anger becomes a detriment to us. It gets us killed, gets us lynched, gets us shot, gets us jailed. So in looking at that syndrome, I suggested that maybe that was one of the things that happened to us. That maybe as a community we were so paralyzed by the intergenerational aspects of the post-traumatic slave syndrome that we were unable to take advantage of the opportunity.
Civic engagement, we have to find a common interest. And it's going to be difficult, but we got to find a common interest that everyone can be a thread in that rope that can bind us. Mm-hmm. Leadership development, finding those key drivers, and strategizing with some priority in each one. And then appreciating each other's personal attributes. Some brothers and sisters, I find myself not wanting to work with them, but I say, no, don't do that. That's a little bit slave mentality. Look for the good part in them. Look for the attributes you can work with that's in them. And then we have no problem.
This panel discussion, as well as the other panel discussions in this series, can be seen in its entirety at padnet.tv, video on demand, and on Padnet's YouTube channel. Long Beach has a very rich history of civic engagement and volunteerism in the African American community. As the Forgotten Images exhibit was on display during our panel discussions, we had the opportunity to interview a few community leaders. As you will see, they all express common priorities that require our attention. Note that their experiences range from the iconic Freedom Riders to launching local initiatives for our community. Valued reflections on the sacrifices that people have made to get us to this place in our community history.
Civic engagement means putting your body, your mind, your heart, and your spirit into making change in the community.
Being involved in your city, from local government elections, being a voter, helping to get the word out, and just being involved in your city from a community service level.
The involvement of different organizations within the city, especially the nonprofits, to get more involved and get involved with the public entity, be it the LA County, be it the LA City, etc.
That's when we talk about civic engagement. We don't just want to be on an island out here by ourselves. We want to bring all this ethnicity together so we can let people know that we are a family.
In order to be able to implement change in your city, you have to find a way to get involved. Being the president of the Arts Council for Long Beach, we do a lot of community engagement, making sure that there's diversity, equity, and inclusion throughout the city, making sure that arts for all is truly arts for all, and so that's one aspect of it.
I'm involved in domestic violence prevention here in the community and anti-sex trafficking, so I work on an advisory commission with Interval House crisis shelters, but particularly with the African American Network for Violence-Free Relationships, and we provide information, support, and community referrals for people who are at risk.
I'm the founder of the 100 Black Men of Long Beach. We just celebrated our 10th year last year, and we're most proud of our mentoring program, ages 8 to 18. And we teach our youth, ages 8 to 18, how and when they're confronted by policemen, how to conduct themselves. And it's proven to be a great success amongst our youth.
As the executive director of the Uptown Business Improvement District in North Long Beach, I'm engaged in teaching and helping our small businesses up there gain resources and to bridge the gap between them as small business owners and the city.
So by being involved on the economic level, it would improve the community, would improve that person's being.
I just feel as it's my duty, and this is how you leave your mark in any place you choose to live, by helping implement change and to hear the voice of the people.
Civic engagement is sort of my Bible, because as a young person I got involved as a freedom rider, as a civil rights activist. I was one of the founders of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee back in the 50s and 60s, and I went to jail for my beliefs.
You can't hide or run from fear. You must let people know you have to be willing to die for what you believe in. And I know at my age, I am so adamant about that, because I know what people struggled and died for, because a lot of my kinfolks, my families, our ancestors, that's what they lived and died for.
If there's something that I'm passionate about, you can sacrifice sleep. Sleep can always be sacrificed.
I was at the Martin Luther King parade. I was at the March on Washington in 1963. And I believe that whatever things that are happening in the community, we have to be engaged.
It's broadening my capacity and broadening the things that I know. It's a constant education and just learning more about the governmental aspects and learning how government functions and works.
What did your grandfather do? I want to let them know that I was a part of the action. I just didn't talk about it, I was going to be about it. And that's what I feel so much about being a part of the civic engagement.
It seems that these leaders feel that civic engagement means putting your body, mind, and heart into making activities that make our city a better place for all to live, work, and enjoy. Get involved. Regardless of where you stand, start from that comfort zone and make a difference. Equality is not equity. These leaders speak to not just making resources available, but rather also ensuring that those that need them can fully engage to benefit. It all starts and ultimately ends with you and I making the decisions and the effort to be involved. Thank you for joining us on today's show. Be sure to follow PadNet TV on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for the latest updates. We also welcome your comments and thoughts regarding this show as we strive to make Long Beach Lens a favorite source of local news, information, and entertainment. This show has been brought to you with support from the Long Beach Community Action Partnership. Thank you for watching Long Beach Lens.